Hi, my name is Érika, I'm a knitter from Brazil, and you are watching 10 knitting mistakes I made so you don't have to. My first mistake was to twist stitches. I did it for 1 year and a half, I think, when I started knitting. I will show you footage of my stuff with twisted stitches, so maybe you can recognize if you are doing the same. When you will notice that? Most probably when you knit something that is knitted partially flat and partially in the round. When you switch from in the round knitting to flat knitting, you will see the difference. It's not an ugly look, that's why maybe you will not notice from the start, but once you see how a normal stockinette should look like, you will notice that it's different. It's pretty easy to solve this one. You only have to learn the anatomy of a stitch. I will leave links in the description by Roxanne Richardson because she's amazing. And that's how I understand that I was twisting my stitches, because the stitches can be seated in the needle like that or like that, and this makes a difference. And also what makes a difference is the direction in which you wrap your yarn. I will try to show you here. You can wrap your yarn in the needle counterclockwise like that, or you can wrap it clockwise like that. If you wrap it clockwise, it will twist your stitches, and normally that's the reason why people twist their stitches. Another thing that can be caused by wrapping your yarn incorrectly in the needles is closing the lace, not resolving the lace. Recently I was knitting a lace pattern, and I was only able to produce the holes of the lace when I paid attention to a tutorial in how she wrapped the yarn over around the needle. Sometimes people can't make one increases because they leave holes. All of these problems, closing your lace, leaving unintentional holes in your increases, or twisting your stitches, can be solved by learning stitch anatomy. And also a bonus that you will get if you learn stitch anatomy is that you will be able to read your knitting and find where you are. You will learn how to counter rows. You will learn how to find your place in a pattern by reading what you have in your work. The second knitting mistake is to swatch incorrectly. There are a few ways to swatch correctly and much more ways to swatch incorrectly. I have made too small swatches, I have made swatches with the wrong stitch. This is a recent discovery because I thought I should swatch with the cabled stitch, and probably I should swatch with stockinette for that specific pattern, even though the pattern is with cables. The first thing you want to do is to check in the pattern if there are specific instructions for swatching for that pattern. If there aren't such instructions, you will want to make a square of at least 15 centimeters by 15 centimeters, which is 6 inches by 6 inches, with the specific needles that you intend to use in your project. If you are going to knit it flat, you swatch flat. If you're going to knit it in the round, you swatch in the round. And you will also want to use, of course, the yarn you're going to use for the project, or at least a yarn that is the same yarn. For example, you have a little bit of a yarn at home but not enough to make an entire project, or you want the project in another color. You can swatch with the one you have and buy the other amount after. And once you have finished knitting your swatch, you will then block. You may avoid blocking if you're knitting with acrylic, but even so I would block because acrylic sometimes relaxes and it will make a little bit of an effect. The gauge in the knitted fabric fresh from the needles and the gauge in the blocked fabric will be different. So if you don't block and then you will block your finished project might grow so much more than you expected. You will lay it down to dry in the shadow, not pin it aggressively, lay it as it is. We may pin lace, but very carefully, not to stretch it out of shape, because you want to know how this fabric will behave normally without special stress. And you will measure your gauge from the middle, away from the edges, because the edges sometimes will curl, will pull, and will give you wrong ideas. You will measure according to the instruction. Sometimes it will be a pattern repeat, sometimes it will be 10 centimeters. Measure then rows and especially stitches in the middle of your swatch. The main consequence of swatching wrong is that you will have a project that doesn't match your expectations. It will be too big, it will be too small, you will maybe have to unravel and start again. So this is all very unpleasant. If you want garments that fit, swatch and swatch correctly. If you want to spare yarn, because swatching in the round would consume a lot of yarn, you can learn to fake a swatch in the round. I will leave links in the description teaching how to swatch fake in the round. There are some things that you will notice from your swatch. Why do you have to knit a large swatch, not just a little tiny one? Because some stitch patterns, the more you knit, the more they change. They may shrink, they may enlarge. For example, seed stitch, sometimes you cast on, it will be like that, and when you finish knitting, it will be like that. Ribbon, when you cast on, it will be like that, but after you knit 10 centimeters of ribbon, it will be like that. 2 centimeters of ribbon, 5 centimeters of ribbon, 10 centimeters of ribbon, they all have different widths, and that's why you need to knit a considerable amount of fabric to see how your stitch will behave, how your fabric will behave when it's ready. The third mistake, which I made all too long, was to cast on or bind off too tightly. I used it to cast on with the long tail cast on, the most popular, and I bound off at first, not even with the regular bind off. I bound off with the gathered bind off, in which you are knitting two together every time, and then it means that it pulls the fabric in, and I would make hems that were even more tight than they could have been with a regular cast off. At first, when we are starting to knit, we think that there is one way to cast on and there is one way to bind off. No, actually there is at least 254 which were added in a book. There are some books only with ways to cast on and bind off, but you don't need to know all of them. But it would be better if you took your time to learn a stretchy cast on and a stretch bind off, because then you won't have knits that cut your circulation every time you try to wear them, as happens with my striped sweaters for the bind off of the cuffs, which I made a regular bind off, and I am unraveling the cuffs this Fix-It February to fix it and to be able to wear it more, because otherwise the cast on is fine, the bind off here is fine, because when I made the bind off at the waist, I had learned it as stretchy bind off, but not at the cuffs. The ones I recommend are the tubular cast-on, the one in which you will have 4 setup rows and you will knit stockinette and then you will pick up stitches from each needle, and the sewn bind off. They have different names, but I will leave the tutorials below, because then you will know which ones I refer to. Both of them take some time, but both of them are super worth the time. It gives a better hem. This is a hem made with such bind off and with such cast on. You see, they match. For ribbed projects, these are the best, but there are others for stockinette projects, like Jenny's stretchy cast on, twisted cast on, Jenny's surprisingly stretchy bind off. Links in the description for you. Another quite common mistake of beginner knitters is picking the wrong pattern. You can make two mistakes. In this case, you can pick a pattern that is too advanced for your current skill level, and you can pick a pattern that has just poor instructions. How to avoid both of these? Well, first I want to make a caveat about this thing that a pattern is too advanced for your current skill level. We don't grow as a knitter or as in anything in life if we don't get some challenges. You need to exercise ourselves in something that's slightly above our current skill level, or really super above our current skill level. It just depends on your own level of comfort, what you are wanting to knit in a given moment, if you are up for a challenge or you prefer more certainty. So it's totally okay to pick a pattern that is wildly out of your current skill level if you want to up your skill level right in the battle. But the important thing is to face a pattern knowing that it will be challenging or wrong even. Because, for example, if you knit vintage, there is a high risk that you will find mistakes in a pattern because they didn't go through test knitting and this kind of thing. It was much more scarce in instructions than current modern patterns. Not a problem, I'm all for it, please knit vintage. But I'm talking about when you pick a pattern and you think it will be a good pattern and it ends up frustrating you. That's what I wanted to avoid. I have two personal examples. One is from my first year of knitting. I had only knitted scarves. Until then, I had knitted a garter scarf, 1x1 rib, a 2x2 rib scarf, and then I decided to knit a cabled scarf with pockets. It was pure frustration. I unraveled that thing as many times that I almost gave up from knitting altogether. I didn't want to look at it. And in the end, I gave up and I picked 10mm needles, held the yarn double, and knitted a 1x1 ribbed scarf for that friend. And the other one was a beanie I made for my brother. It was a free pattern, and I don't even blame the author, they just wanted to share what they did. However, it's a very bad pattern, to be honest. The instructions they give for adjusting it do not cover an important adjustment, and thus it grows wrong, which is very usual for patterns. When you enlarge them without taking care of the proportions, they will misshape. That's what happened with this beanie, and that's why I unraveled it. You see, both of those patterns ended up unraveled. How you can solve this issue? Well, the first thing would be, when you are browsing for patterns, go for patterns that have a lot of projects. Yes, it kinda maintains the sameness of knitting community, but if you are a beginner, this is a good thing because you will be able to see other people's projects. You will see how they evaluated that pattern. Go for patterns with many projects and with good evaluation. In Ravelry, you can see there is an evaluation given by the knitters. It's stars. They have an overall evaluation for the pattern and a clarity evaluation, and also a difficult scale, which all of them are compiled from the evaluations of the knitters. Check that. You can filter your search for only 5-star patterns, only 4-star patterns, and all this kind of thing. If you want to be sure of a very, very good pattern to start, go there and read the notes of the other knitters, because if you do that before you start knitting your own, after you read the pattern or before, you will be aware beforehand of troublesome places, of instructions that maybe don't work. You should read especially the notes from people from your size, but also the others, because they may show you the problems and provide you with the solutions. They may have notes about how they did to resolve that question, that issue. If you don't have Ravelry, or if you don't want to use it, or if you already looked at Ravelry and it didn't give you a good information, you can look through YouTube. People will talk about some projects in their knitting podcasts, and if you type the name of the project, YouTube will search the podcasts that have that project. If the YouTuber mentioned it, especially if they linked it at the description, you can search for it in TikTok, you can search for it in Instagram, normally from the hashtag that is provided by the designer in their pattern. You can make extensive research to be sure that you want to spend that money in that pattern and you want to knit that pattern. And even if you're going for a free pattern, try to go for experienced designers. Many experienced designers create design for yarn companies. So in yarn companies that provide patterns for free, such as Hobby, Rowan, and Universal Yarns, Yarn Inspirations, you can find patterns that are signed by renowned designers. Go for this, they will tend to be more reliable. Once you have selected your pattern, acquired and downloaded your pattern, you will want to knit through everything. I made this mistake of not knitting through the entire patterns more times than I would like to admit. And the latest time was in my most active whip, this lovely canary yellow tee. It's the Colette tee by Witter Design. The pattern is a little weird, but the mistakes I made were my own doing because I did not read the entire thing beforehand. The most common mistake you will face when you do that will be you will miss instructions that say at the same time do that. Then you will finish an entire section making one instruction, and then you will get to the end of it and you will have at the same time, which means that you should have been doing this instruction together with the other ones. This was responsible for making me have to unravel it once. And then there is my next mistake, which was responsible for making me unravel it the second time, or the third, I don't remember. You can misread something. Here, for example, I misread how I was supposed to do the raglan increases up here. In a moment you should make them only inside the stitch markers, and in another moment you should make them inside and outside, and I misread that. I made everything wrong and I had to unravel it. My other pattern in which I had made similar mistakes by misreading instructions was this one, and it ended up being so different from the original. You can see it here. See this top? It's my Cabana Club top by Squid Knits. I have subscribed for her school of vintage knitting for a while, so I have all her patterns until that date. And this one I will show you now in the screen how it was supposed to look, and you will understand how wrong it is, because I read centimeters as inches, I think, or the contrary. It's a very common mistake. Pay attention to your units of measurement, because 5 inches and 5 centimeters look totally different. I have also misread which needle I was supposed to wear for a neckline, for a cuff, or for something like that, or for some detail, and it also affects the end product. Sometimes you only notice when it is the end and you will not want to unravel. So to avoid unraveling, read with attention and double check. Another pretty common knitting mistake, picking the wrong yarn for the project or just picking the wrong yarn in general. Let me explain. When I was starting to knit, I didn't know the compositions of yarns, the fibers, the plies, everything that comes into making a yarn, and the properties of the fibers, all this kind of things. So I would sometimes pick the yarn according to the best offer, so to say. My biggest mistakes in this aspect were to buy too thick yarn and especially too thin yarn. The thing is, the lighter your yarn in weight, in density, the more meters or yards you will have in one skein. This said, if you have 400 meters in one skein of 100 grams, you already know it's basically a fingering weight. But if you have a yarn that is a chunky weight, you will have then 60 meters in the same 100 grams. Yarn is sold by weight, as in grams. Then it means that the heavier a yarn, the more grams you will need, and so your project will tend to cost also more expensive. In fact, there is a direct correlation between weight of yarn, meterage, and price. When I started knitting, I bought a lot of super bulky weight and I bought a lot of cotton thread because I saw that they were selling 1000 meters in 100 grams and it wasn't very expensive. So I thought, oh, I can buy this and then I can make so many projects with this one skein of yarn. Yes and no, because, well, the cotton thread is very, very thin. I did manage to make some projects with it, but as it's very thin, you won't find many patterns that were made to work with it. You can find some searching for vintage patterns, and this is somehow how I got into vintage knitting, but you can find as many because designers will tend to create patterns for yarns that are kinda in the middle, from fingering weight to aran, sometimes to bulky weight, and even more rarer to super bulky weight. Super bulky weight gets in fashion every now and then people knit a lot with it. However, depending on the composition, it falls apart pretty easily. It's too heavy to wear, it's too hot to wear, so people end up abandoning it. Normally they knit a lot with super bulky weight in the beginning of their knitting career, and also this means that their super bulky garments are not the best knitted items they have, which happened to my own. I have a few super bulky garments that I don't wear as much. However, I would say that super bulky or bulky weight is still pretty good for gifts, except that actual wool super bulky weight tends to be expensive. The price is also influenced by the composition of the yarn, which is also very important. Because, for example, if you want to knit something to keep warm in the highest of winter, you will not do well if you pick a summer fiber such as cotton or linen. If you want, however, to keep fresh in the summer, you will not do well if you pick wool or acrylic, because acrylic was made to imitate the properties of wool. It doesn't imitate them perfectly, I should say, but the intention was that, so it will make you warm and then you will overheat. I never made this mistake because I learned that very early in my knitting career. However, I have tried to swatch for lace with acrylic and it did not work because acrylic doesn't have memory, such as the natural fibers have. If you block a natural fiber, the stitches will relax and it will stay in the shape that it was blocked. With blocking, you can open up the lace and it will form the beautiful design that you were knitting. With acrylic, it will tend to stay in the shape in which it was knitted, which for lace knitting is a little bit cramped up. So you won't be able to get marvelous lace with acrylic. It will relax the stitches, but it will not open the lace as the other fibers, both animal or plant fibers, do. You have to educate yourself about yarn, and I have a few resources that I want to recommend. The first of them is the Book of Yarn by Clara Parks, and also the Book of Wool, but mainly the Book of Yarn, because the Book of Yarn covers from natural fibers, animal fibers, plant fibers, until synthetics, and it goes through the fiber contents, it goes through the number of plies, it goes through the construction of yarn, and how each of these details will affect your final product. Apart from the book, I will direct you to two YouTubers that made excellent videos about yarns. One is Wood Needles Hands. She has several videos about yarn, about bulky weight, about boucle, about mohair, about plant fibers, about how you can identify one yarn if you bought it without a label, if it's a plant fiber or if it's a natural fiber or if it's synthetic. Especially about plant fibers, I will direct you to Mel Makes Stuff video about plant fibers, which is a must-see. She covers a lot there about those plant fibers, and if you knit with cotton, linen and this kind of thing, this is a obligatory stop. And of course, I will recommend this not only about yarn, but for everything. Just watch Roxanne Richardson's Casual Fridays and her other videos too. But if you binge her Casual Fridays series, you will learn so much about yarn, about patterns, about knitting constructions, about the history of knitting. Her videos are amazing. I would recommend you also to watch yarn reviews from people who buy yarns that are around you, because you will have the yarns that you can actually buy. For the US, the person that makes such reviews very well is TL Yarn Crafts. You probably know her already, but if you don't, because maybe you are not into crochet, go watch her Yarn Snob reviews. They are very amazing, and she swatches and she goes through every detail of the yarn she bought, and she buys a lot to test. If you are in Brazil, I would recommend you to watch Blog by Dai. She has a very comprehensive playlist with reviews from circular yarns from several years. Most of them are still in the market, some aren't. Other places that you can learn about specific yarns would be yarnsub.com. It's a yarn substitution site. You plug there the yarn that is recommended for the pattern you are intending to knit, and you will get a number of options, and they are ranked by the percentage of similarity to the recommended yarn. And for the Brazilian viewers, I have a good news that Brazilian yarns were included in the site. Some months ago, I have messaged the owner of the site and asked her to include circular yarns, penguin yarns, and some other Brazilian yarns in there. And she was so amazing. She was so kind. She replied to me and she said that she would do it as soon as she could. I sent her the link where she could find the information. And after some time, I found our yarns there. So this is a resource that is useful for the Brazilian viewers as well today. You also have the yarn section of Ravelry, and there you can find information about many yarns. If you don't have your yarn logged into the site, you can add the data there to add it to your stash. You can see other people's stash. You can see concrete projects that were knitted with that yarn, even from discontinued yarns. Sometimes you won't find information about it even in the website of the company because they don't longer produce it, but you will find information on Ravelry. Sometimes you buy discontinued yarn from some discounted basket or something, and you will find information there. And of course, the websites of the yarn companies are also a great place to learn details about their own yarns. Very common mistake for beginner knitters is not so much a knitting mistake as it's a style mistake, but it influences our desire to keep knitting. Because if you keep knitting stuff that doesn't suit us and we don't wear or use the stuff we knit, well, we will feel discouraged to keep knitting. And the mistake is then knitting something that didn't suit me, either by color or by style. I can bring 2 examples of stuff that didn't suit me. The main one is my Sophie shawl, which I knitted in brown and cream. The shawl is amazing. I love how it is. It's a piece of art for me, and it's also memory of a very pleasant moment of my life. So I won't never give up on this shawl. It's my shawl. It will keep like that forever. However, it doesn't suit me. The color combination, you can see everything about it in my every Sophie ever knitted video. You will see there, and it may look like it suits me in the camera, but in real life, bright white, pure white works much better for me. The shawl then doesn't go with my clothes, and then I don't wear it. It doesn't go with me, and then I don't wear it as much. I wear it at home, of course. The other thing is the first sweater I ever knitted for me, which is my seed stitch pullover by Rosemary Drysdale. I haven't talked about this yet in my videos previously, but you can see the picture here. It is from a Vogue Knitting magazine. It was knitted in pieces except for the sleeves and for the neckline, and even though I did shrink the pattern so I could wear it, because the original one uses 12mm needles and I didn't have, and I knitted it with 8mm needles, which made the final product much smaller. I still don't wear it as much because it's oversized. I don't like very much oversized garments. I do like some oversized cardigans and jackets and this kind of thing, but pullovers not so much, and especially because it doesn't hit me in a nice place. I like stuff that hits me completely below my hips or at the waist. At most in the beginning of my hips. This hits me midway through my hips. It makes my body have a weird shape and it drowns me a little bit. It's very cozy for a winter wear. I can dress that and I'm kind of in a blanket, but the sleeves are kind of short for the overall thing. I wear it at home for coziness. I don't wear it for beauty, and we like to have our garments for both, right? So the best thing we can do to solve this problem will be to study our style, to know our own style and how to translate it in knitwear. I want to make a couple videos about it because before starting to knit, I spent 3-4 years studying style, studying personalized style systems and color systems. So I have some background that I could share with you, applying it to knitting. But by now I will direct you to True Summer Knits. She has an amazing video about color season. I would have some things to add to that, but I may make my own video later, maybe especially directed towards dark winter, which is my own palette that I know the best. If you want me to make a video about it, write in the comments please, then I will make it a priority. If not, by now you can know the basics with True Summer Knits video and the comments of people in her video, because many things were added there and she covers it pretty well. Well, as I mentioned, I have studied personalized not only color but style systems, because I think that fruit shape fashion tips like hourglass, apple shape, pear shape, this is very outdated and it brings all women to the same thing. And we don't want to be uniform, we want to be unique. I like those systems because they are geared towards the individual, and of course they also have their problems. Sometimes they are very gendered, sometimes they are very guided by societal stereotypes and cultural stereotypes from the country of origin of the stylist. So you will have problems there, but it's useful to take a look. I would quote Kibe, which is for me, I believe, the worst of the possibilities. Zyla, David Zyla, Fantastical Beauty, it's very cool, and Truth is Beauty is my favorite. And also I will recommend you the book The Triumph of Individual Style. It's an amazing book that teaches about beauty through to art. They will go through your physical appearance and they will give you, in every case, options to disguise or to accentuate one characteristic, and they will show how it's celebrated in art. Even those that are not in the mainstream, it's not the beauty standard of today, so to say. Also, you can make Pinterest boards for inspiration with stuff you like. I would recommend making Pinterest board, which is your basics, which you actually wear, not stuff aspirational. You can of course knit aspirational stuff, but if you want practicality, make a Pinterest board based on what you have in your wardrobe and you actually wear, and then you can add aspirational stuffs there. You can make one basic and one aspirational board, have fun there, just make your experimentation there so you can process your choices of yarn or of pattern better and know beforehand what will work for you and what will not. And of course, experimentation, especially with knitting constructions. You can think that you like one thing or another, but there is no way to know for sure unless you go and you make one drop shoulder sweater, make a rounded yoke, make any kind of construction, and you may be surprised or you may confirm that you really don't like that one. And either way, the conclusion will be good. I want to add a caveat to all that I said before, that you don't have to make stuff that suits you. You may never knit a garment, for starters, and you may also never knit something that you will wear because you want to knit for the process, and this is completely okay. You do you. My tip is for those that want what I am talking about here. My tip is for those that it's relevant for. Another common mistake for a beginner is to not use knitting accessories. By now you may have seen those videos, the influencing knitting, do not buy this or that accessory. And while I agree with the takes in most of them, I do think that some accessories really help your knitting. The main ones would be stitch markers, row counters. The row counter doesn't have to be an accessory, it can be an app. The one I use is one. Cable needles for those who need it, and lifelines. Those 4 things save your knitting. The cable scarf that I mentioned earlier, I wanted to knit for my friend and I didn't manage to make. I am sure I can make that now if I use those 4 accessories. I can control the rows I am in with the row counter. I can mark the section in which I have to cable with my stitch markers. If I need to correct my mistakes, I can use a lifeline and thread it through the place where it is correct. So if I unravel, the thread will hold the part that is correct in place, and I can pick up my stitches from that section. And a cable needle also helps very much. Do use your accessories and you will be a much happier, much more fulfilled knitter. If with time you stop needing them, throw them away. But at first, use them. You will thank me later. And the final mistake I have for you today is not to trust your instinct. Maybe in the very beginning, you won't have developed an instinct for knitting, but pretty soon you will. After you knit a few garments and you see how the garments you like look when they are being knitted, you can feel when a garment will not turn out okay. You can feel when something is going wrong. With me, it's usually I can feel the sizing is wrong. And every single time I felt that, I knitted a little longer just to be sure. I measured it and it was long. It was too large, it was too little, so I had to unravel everything. The longer I took to acknowledge that my instinct was correct and either correct the mistake or drop the project altogether, the more frustrated I was in the end because I had to unravel more fabric or I ended up with a project that didn't work. So you are your main tool when knitting. Trust your gut. And these were my 10 mistakes which I made when I was a beginner knitter, which I kinda still am when we stop being beginner knitters after all. But I have a little more experience now and I can share this with you. I keep making mistakes. Some of the mistakes I mentioned were very recent. I don't think we ever stop making mistakes, but we can try to learn from them and not repeat them. If we can learn from others' mistakes and eliminate them from our repertoire, this is much better. We spare ourselves suffering. So I hope this video was this opportunity for you to learn from my mistakes and not make the same things and not get the same frustration. I hope you liked my video. I hope you come back for other ones. You can check my other videos that are already in the channel, see what I have knitted before, what I am knitting currently, and I hope you subscribe, like the video, and tell me in the comments which mistakes did you make, which ones frustrated you the most and you would like to warn other people against it. Let's hear each other, and until the next one. Bye bye.